Well, good morning, my friends. It's your old pal Jordan the Lion, and we are still in Cleveland, and today we are going to a cemetery. Look what just happened on the bed. Look what just happened on the bed. Who is that over there? Yeah, he's here. Yeah, so we're going to go to a cemetery today in Cleveland, and we're going to hopefully find the grave of a war hero, a baseball hero, and a man that really made his face synonymous with baseball for a very long time. So today, hopefully, we will see the grave of the great Bob Feller. Daze with Jordan the Lion begins now. Hey, you know what's funny? You came up there and you were trying to photobomb me, and then as soon as I hit record, I watched you. You literally just turned your head away like you didn't notice I was recording. What a ham you are. How are you, Ja? Are you having fun in Ohio? Now, Bob Feller, they say, technically could have been considered the greatest pitcher of all time had he not went into the Navy in World War II. He was going to negotiate his contract with the Indians and heard about Pearl Harbor happening and immediately enlisted and gave up almost 4 seasons worth of wins and strikeouts. Here we are. Very, very small cemetery, the North Cemetery outside of Cleveland. Final resting place of Bob Feller. It's technically called Gates Mills. This cemetery is so small they don't even have an office to go ask for any kind of help as to where he's buried, so I'm going to be on my own here. I do have a pretty good idea of where it is, and I know that there's some shrubbery planted right directly behind his tombstone, so if I can find that, and it's a pretty small cemetery, we should be in luck. Yeah, this is a very, very, very quaint cemetery. For a man who is as huge in stature as he was, both physically and just in his profession, I think that's him right there. I know he has a little horseshoe bush behind there. Let's clean off his headstone. I'm pretty sure that's him. I see 1918. He was born in 1918. We also have some military flags, so. Well, thank you, rental car company, for leaving this in there. Robert William Andrew Feller. What a humble headstone for such a big guy. Now, this guy was known as Bullet Bob, probably more notably known as the Heater from Van Meter. He was a farm boy from Van Meter, Iowa, and if you like the movie Field of Dreams or The Natural, you probably like Bob Feller. They say those were heavily based off of him. He was both of those characters, basically. He was the Natural because he had this farm boy upbringing. He credited changing tractor tires, shucking corn, basically just living on a farm, milking cows, as being what made his hands and his wrists and his shoulders so strong. Where nowadays they kind of believe, you know, that a lot of your power comes from your legs. He believed it really came from your upper body. And at one point, before he went to the war, he was clocked at pitching 104 miles per hour, and then after, when he came back, he was clocked at 107. Now, he got his start. Now, what's kind of cool about him is that he was just always strong as a kid from being a farm boy, and his dad really helped to support what he was doing, this love of baseball. So primarily their farm was corn and wheat because they could do it quickly and then get on to playing baseball for the day. And his dad, when I said he was kind of like the Field of Dreams, his dad built him a baseball field out in this cornfield out on their farm and built stands and a scoreboard and everything. And so Bob would spend his days throwing the ball with his dad, pitching, and then he would eventually join the American Legion because he was just, he was so good. Even at like 12 or 13 years old, he was hurting his dad's hands throwing the ball. So he ended up joining the American Legion team, and his catcher ended up winning a Heisman Trophy. That tells you how impressive this battery would have been between the two. But one day when he was 16 years old, a scout for the Cleveland Indians came out to see him pitch. And the guy said, I sat on my bumper for what had to be 6-7 innings, and it was probably really uncomfortable, but I never noticed it because I was just completely in awe of this kid pitching. He just never wore out. He was just unbelievable. And basically came back and signed Bob Feller at the age of 16. He made his debut the following year when he was 17. He was still in high school. He was making his debut during his summer break. And in his very first pitching attempt, he did pretty well. 15 strikeouts. Gave up 1 run and won the game. I mean, that's incredible. Now, Bob Feller would go on to have an amazing career. In fact, I think Ted Williams was the player I saw in a book say Bob Feller had the best fastball and curveball I ever saw. And there were other players that said when they were up to bat against him, they said, even if I didn't think it was a strike, it was coming by so fast, I had to judge whether it was a strike based off of what I heard after it went by. Now, he ended up being so great that he pitched the very first no-hitter on opening day, and not only the first, but to my knowledge, the only no-hitter on opening day. He threw 3 no-hitters in his career, but he had 12 games where he threw a one-hitter, and he was the first pitcher to ever throw a no-hitter in Yankee Stadium that wasn't a Yankee, so he was the first opposing pitcher. Now, he had a phenomenal career, and in fact, he was, when he went to the war, basically what happened was he was going to Chicago to meet with the general manager of the Cleveland Indians to sign a new contract, and he was supposed to get like $100 grand, they said. Well, on his way there, I think he said he was in Moline and he heard that Pearl Harbor had been attacked. And he basically called someone from a payphone right there and set up for them to come and meet with him the next day and for him to enlist. Now, he didn't have to because his dad actually was dying of cancer at the time, and Bob was the sole income earner for his family, and so that would have given him a deferment. But like I said, he insisted, and not only did he insist, he went in there and flat out said, I will not, like, I don't want some cushy calisthenics job where I'm just doing morale stuff. I want to be in it. I want to be involved. I want to be battling. I want to fight, and he did. And he served his entire term, which was almost 4 years, and then within 48 hours of being discharged, he was back on the field, man. Can you believe that? He was back. He was back pitching and was as good as ever because, like I said, when he came back in 46, his pitch was faster than it had been before. A lot of people say he is by far the fastest pitcher we'll ever see because, you know, now there's all kinds of steroids and performance enhancing things that even now they find ways of covering up. But back then it was just all muscle. It was natural ability, and that's what he had. So when he came back, he ended up helping the Indians win the 1948 World Series, which is the last time they ever won a World Series. And, you know, he played his entire career in Cleveland, which says a lot because look around. You know, he made his home here. But you got to remember, when baseball season starts back up, even though they do their spring training in Arizona and Florida, the reason they do that is because it's so cold everywhere else. And a lot of times when they start the season back up in March, it's still cold in Cleveland, Chicago, places like that. So he made his whole career pitching in this kind of weather and ended up becoming basically an ambassador for not only baseball, because they would always go to him and ask him questions, because this is a guy who, you know, he pitched to Lou Gehrig, you know. He went back, he was one of the only people in his time when he was alive to be able to recount the 1930s, that great baseball boom of the 30s. And he was always out there to be outspoken. He was I think he was the prime person that got a pension for players so that they could help save money for after baseball. And every year when spring training would kick off, Bob Feller always threw out the first pitch. That was just customary. And even when he was 90, I think he was 90 years old, he came out to throw a pitch. They wanted him to do the ceremonial first pitch at I believe it was the World Series game, and he told his friends, he said, I'm gonna do it from the rubber and I'm gonna throw a strike. And he did. And they said, you know, even up until his last days, he was still participating in like the Hall of Fame old timers games, going out there and at least throwing a couple of pitches. God, what a hero. You know, he even, I remember when I was big into autograph collecting, Bob Feller was one of those people who you could send a baseball, you could send something to his house, and as long as you included like a $10 bill or something, he would sign it. And I don't think he was doing it for the money. I think he actually was donating it to the players' funds, stuff like that. I think he was big on that, knowing what kind of life players had had after baseball, and he was really committed to helping the cause. It's amazing that he has such a solemn little grave here. But God, for what a big guy. I mean, they said he was just so imposing. He had great stats. I mean, he was a Hall of Famer, no question. But to think of what his stats would have been like if he got to play that extra 4 seasons. He even said, he's like, I don't care. I'm proud of my service, and I wouldn't take those 100 games for anything now. I wouldn't want that, because that's basically what they said, was they said that if you take what he had done the 4 years before he went into the service and the 4 years after, and they averaged it out, they said he would have probably been about a 350 game winner. And for a guy who pretty much his entire career was leading the league in strikeouts and games won, he really literally could have went down as the greatest of all time. He would have had stats probably higher than even like Walter Johnson. And then again, a guy named Nolan Ryan would come along later that would make those 3 no-hitters look like nothing, because Nolan Ryan would have 7. And Sandy Koufax had, I think, 5. So yeah, Bob Feller said, you know, he's like, I may have been the first to throw a no-hitter on opening day, but I kind of doubt I'll be the last. He always knew that the game was gonna progress. He always knew that the game would keep going, and it was always kind of cool. You can still look up and find interviews of him talking about how things should be, and he was always very outspoken. Rest in peace, Bob Feller. Now even at the new park, even though he didn't play there, I think when he started playing, he was playing at League Park. They have a statue of Bob in his big wind-up, that big fastball wind-up displayed at the park. Well, my friends, if you love baseball and you love the natural or you love Field of Dreams, I hope you appreciated today's vlog. Bob Feller is a guy that will always be known in history of baseball as one of the all-time greats in pretty much every category. Have a great night, everyone. We'll see you all tomorrow. Goodbye.